Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Irene and today I'll show you how I made a scrap wood lantern with faux ice paint sides. This is a super fun project and I hope you like it. To make the lantern, I'll use plain wooden photo frames. These are from IKEA. You can find similar ones in Dollar Tree as well. I'm removing the glass and the back and pulling out the little holders. I'm going to make the sides out of epoxy resin, and before that I'm staining the frames, as after the wood will be covered with resin, I will not be able to do that. I'm using a water-based stain of Liberon brand and the color is called Old Wood. To prevent the resin from leaking, you want to put the frames onto a smooth surface and seal the contour using hot glue or a sealant, and these frames have Plexiglas covered with protective film, and I've decided to attach the Plexiglas onto the front side of the frames. Then I will fill them from the inside with epoxy resin, and after it cures, I'll remove the Plexiglas. Of course, I could simply install the glass on the inside as it sits originally and cover it with epoxy resin, but I was afraid that the resin would leak through the groove along the edges and I'll end up having leaks outside, and secondly I wanted to make it look like pieces of ice are inserted into the lantern, so I didn't want to use glass here. I'm mixing the resin as per the instructions. The resin I use says mixing 100 parts of epoxy resin with 30 parts of hardener. I'm stirring everything well and pouring the mixture into the frames with glass panes, which are hot glued to them on the outside. I'm trying to pour an equal amount of resin into each frame, so I'm applying a spoon into each frame one by one. The first layer is quite thin, just to make a protective layer of resin, where I will arrange dry leaves and flowers. Before pouring, I put a transparent film under the frames, as I'm afraid that the resin will leak onto the table or onto the floor, and also this will be a dust protector. I'm covering the frames with the film and taping the edges, and leaving it like this for a couple of days to cure. The precautions I used turned out to be not superfluous at all. Even though I tried very hard to glue everything well, the resin in one of the frames has found a tiny hole and leaked onto the film, so I'm glad that I decided to protect the table. I'll also need leaves and flowers for arrangements inside the lantern. I've picked leaves that have turned purple already, and I've added some yellow and green ones. Drying them in a book would take a long time and I didn't have enough patience for that, so I'll use an iron. It's really quick, and although I have burned a couple of branches a little, in general I'm happy with the result. I'm placing a leaf or a twig in a paper napkin, gently straightening it so that everything is more or less flat, covering it with the second half of the napkin and ironing in several cycles until the leaves get dry. I've dried a few sprigs of blueberries, leaves of parthenocissus, a few sprigs of boxwood and tuya, and hydrangea flowers. By the way, I really love dried hydrangea. I also want to make some extra for future projects. The flowers are very nice. Then I'm arranging the dried leaves and flowers inside the frames. At first I wanted to make a hodgepodge display, but then I changed my mind and I'm arranging the leaves and twigs in frames by type. Well, it's like you are looking through an autumn window and there's some kind of landscape behind it. I'm cutting the larger leaves to frame the window. Here, don't forget that all the leaves should be placed face down. In places, I'm arranging the leaves horizontally as if they were falling from a tree and froze like that. And after that, I'm filling the arrangements with more epoxy resin. Here the leaves have tried to float away, so I've had to adjust the arrangement with a spoon. And I'm covering everything with the film again, so that dust won't get in. After the resin cured, it was time to remove the plexiglass. And here, to be honest, I had some problems. The hot glue I use is a good quality one, and this is why I couldn't disassemble the glass and the frames. It held too well. So I'm just cutting off the glue with a box knife and then taking out the plexiglass. I also have to sand the frames to remove the hot glue remnants and some chipping, as well as the resin on one of the frames where it had leaked, and I'm restaining all the sanded areas. The front side of the resin paint turned out to be not as glossy as I would like it to be, and I'm applying a little more resin on the outside for extra glossy look. And now I'll assemble the lantern. This time I'll use some leftover planks and boards. I'm cutting thin planks 1/2 by 1/2 inch to make the side spacers and the top trim. I've also found a piece of wooden molding in my barn. It's really old with nails in it and is painted with oil paint, but I really like its shape. So I've sanded off the paint and I'm cutting pieces at 45-degree angles. I'm going to make the cover of the lantern from it. And finally, I'll need square pieces for the bottom and the top. I'm cutting them from scraps of a wooden board that I've also found in the barn. I'm giving all the parts a good sand and next I'll assemble them. First, I'm attaching the spacers on the longer sides of the two frames. These frames will be located opposite each other, so you need to decide where each side will sit in the lantern. I'm using wood glue as usual. After drying, I'm attaching the remaining two frames to the spacers, assembling the lantern main body. I'm attaching the square frame out of the same 1/2 by 1/2 inch planks onto the top of the base. I think the lantern looks more finished like this. And I'm attaching the bottom square part from below. This time I've decided not to make legs, but make a tapering bottom. So I've cut another square frame from pieces of a thin molding and I'm attaching it to the bottom from below. And then I'm adding another smaller square, so I'll end up with a nice curvy bottom part. I'm assembling the lantern cover from the pieces of the old molding. I'm assembling a square frame from 4 identical pieces and attaching a small square piece of board on top. Here I've selected all the sizes according to the frame's size and molding shapes, so I don't think providing my sizes will be of any help. I'm attaching another square frame out of that same thin molding onto the cover. Here I had just a small piece of this molding, so if you're going to buy a molding, one piece will be just enough. The cover of the lantern will be embedded, so I've cut more thin planks for a ledge to fit into the lantern, and I'm attaching them to the bottom of the cover. finally I'll attach a wooden cube on top. My husband has helped me to drill it through, as I always have problems with drilling vertically at a right angle. I'm attaching the drilled cube to the very top of the cover, and after the glue dries well, I'm sanding all the corners a little with a sanding block to smooth sharp edges and remove chips if any. And after that, I'll stain the entire lantern. I'll use the same stain that I used for the frames in the beginning. Since the lantern was assembled from leftover pieces, they all have kind of different color. The old molding is reddish, the planks are almost white, and the lumber board is something in between. I wish I had used darker stain for the frames to cover this difference in shades better, but I can't restain the frames now under the epoxy resin, so I'll use the shade that I chose initially. I'm staining the lantern both on the outside and the inside. After the stain has dried, I'm sealing the lantern with a matte acrylic sealer. I want to enhance the landscape effect, so to speak, of the epoxy paint, so I've decided to make a little diorama inside the lantern. I'm smearing the bottom of the lantern with white glue thoroughly and placing several balls of dry moss there, and I'm filling all the gaps in between with preserved reindeer moss. I've also found this charming little house in my stock. I don't remember where I bought it, but I'll try to find links to similar ones. I'm gluing the roof to the house because it doesn't hold well. And then I'm staining it to fit the lantern. And I'm painting the roof of the house crimson. Here I'm trying to match it in color with the leaves on the sides of the lantern. All that is left is to finish the lantern cover. I'm threading a piece of thick rope into the pre-drilled hole in the top, sewing the ends together with threads, and then smearing it well with wood glue and hiding the junction inside the hole. And finally, for lighting up the lantern, I'll use my favorite option, fairy lights. I've decided to hide the battery pack under the cover, so I'm cutting two pieces of elastic, hot gluing them into rings and placing these elastic rings on the battery pack. And then I'm hot gluing the elastic bands with the battery pack sitting in them onto the cover. Now I can use the elastic bands for holding the battery pack, as well as arranging the fairy lights to hang like a cloud under the top of the lantern, and it's easy to remove the battery pack if you need to change batteries. I'm placing the tiny house inside and then the cover. This time I haven't made a cover lock and it just comes off. The lantern turned out to be very fall-inspired and a little magical. Well, as for me, fall has some magic in it, and I love it. The lantern looks amazing in the garden and very organic because of all the natural wood, and I really like the effect of frozen leaves on its sides. I'm thinking of turning it into a winter inspired over time by placing some artificial snow inside and making frosty patterns on the glass using a transparent outliner. And maybe I'll even add a tiny frozen lake near the house out of a piece of mirror. Do you think it will be good?
Well, I hope you liked today's project. Actually, I have a whole bunch of other lanterns on my channel. I made the beaded lantern, the bamboo skewers lantern, the Jenga tower lantern. Actually, I have so many. I'll leave the links for all of these tutorials down below in case you haven't seen them already. Thanks for being here and hope to see you in my next one. Bye!